Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something that's helped transform my daily routine. I've started using Bob, the refillable bottle-free body wash designed specifically for men. If you're still using bottled shower gel, you're literally washing money down the drain. Let's face it, you always use more than you need, and half of it just slips through your hands before it touches your skin. Bob combines a reusable applicator with exfoliating bristles and the world's first refillable body wash bars, formulated to match a man's skin pH of 5.5. All this means you get a deep clean with zero wastage. It's better for your skin, better for your wallet, and better for the planet. For an exclusive 15% offer on your first order, head over to welcometobob.com and use the code meaningofmen15 at checkout. Welcome back to The Meaning of Men, the show dedicated to helping men find meaning, purpose, and resilience in their lives. I'm your host, Simeon Atkins, and today we're exploring the power of strive, a mindset that redefines how we grow, perform, and find lasting fulfillment. My guest is renowned high-performance researcher and author, Dr. Adam Fraser, who reveals why struggle, not comfort, is the real catalyst for growth. We unpack the dangers of relentlessly chasing happiness, the myth of goal completion, and why fulfillment often comes from the challenges we'd rather avoid. Whether you're looking to boost workplace productivity or just need the motivation to go about your daily life, this episode explores the little-known truths about happiness, purpose, and fulfillment, and how joy is often in the striving, not the destination. Let's get into it. Dr. Adam Fraser, what do you believe the people, especially men, who read your books or listen to you speak are struggling with the most?
Wow, that is a big question. I think men are struggling with two things, and this might sound a bit cliched, but definitely the first one is just their place in the world and how they're supposed to act. Just because the world has changed so much and the role of men has changed so much, I think they're struggling to find their feet. And self-awareness of what's happening in my internal world and how do I regulate it so I can exhibit better behaviors.
Tell us a little bit more about who you are and the journey that's led you to doing what you're doing today.
So I went to university and I studied biomedical science, which is a blend of psychology and physiology. So looking at both the body and the mind and how it affects performance, our life, our health, all those sorts of things. I didn't want to go down the psychologist road because you have to do all these hours of supervision and counseling people. And I'm like, I do not want to be a counselor. So I went down the research realm of psychology, did an honors, did a PhD, worked with the lead athletes, which I could tell you wasn't nearly as good as what I thought it would be. And then started to work with businesses around how do people evolve their behavior, their well-being and their psychology to have better performance. So whether that is we create a better culture at work, whether that is our ability to adapt and evolve. So that's where I spend my time now is really, I'm either speaking at conferences, running workshops, doing research with universities or running large-scale programs and interventions.
We're going to be talking today about Strive State. And since first hearing you talk about it, I've done a lot more reading and research into it because I feel it's a fascinating mindset in terms of how we're looking at performance and achievement and ultimately getting to this state where we feel more fulfilled and happy in our lives. Let's start with the basics. In a nutshell, how would you define what Strive State is?
Well, how that book came about, and what we do is we do research and we look for really interesting findings. So we were studying flow. I'm sure you've heard of that flow state. You know, in basketball, they call the hot hand, where you just can't miss, like you're just in the zone. So we were studying this, but more from a work perspective. And the characteristics of flow is you have really high challenge. You have to use all your skills. You're completely engaged and on board with it. Time seems to vanish. And the last one is around something you enjoy and want to do, right? So flow is that high performance state. But what kept happening is in our research and in our interviews, people said, yeah, flow's awesome. But the circumstance where I really grow and evolve and I'm proud of myself is high challenge. I need all my skills, but it's something that I don't want to do. Like it terrifies me. I'd rather avoid it, and time still seems to vanish. So what was different is they said, these are things like I have to have a hard conversation with a staff member. High challenge, got to bring all my skills. Do not want to be there. Do not want to have the conversation. It terrifies me. Time does tend to vanish. And what they said is after those experiences, I look at it and go, far out, man, like I really nailed that, or I really took that on. And so strive state was where you're heavily stretched and it's something that frightens and challenges you, but you engage in it and you come out the other side a much more evolved person. So that's what strive's all about. And we wrote a book about that and how you do it and what are the characteristics.
And the key there, as you were saying, is it's something that you'd rather not do and you're being heavily stretched, but there still has to be this element of being engaged ultimately in doing it. And then the reward afterwards is, wow, I did that, even though it was high challenge and something that I didn't ultimately want to do in the first place.
Yeah. So can I give you an example? So for me as a presenter, yeah, I've been presenting for 20 years. I've worked on that craft and it was in my comfort zone. I could walk out and I could do it quite easily. But I got booked to speak at a conference that the Dalai Lama was at. And when I walked out on stage, in the front row were all my heroes, like Carol Dweck, who did the growth mindset, fixed mindset, Ed Diener, who's one of the best researchers we've ever seen on happiness, Todd Cash, like all my heroes were in the front row. And this challenge was so overwhelming and it was such a stretch. I thought, I'm physically going to be sick. I don't know if I can do this. And I just kind of said to myself, like I was looking for a way to get out of it. But I said to myself, if you're going down, go down swinging, like just give it everything you've got. And I walked out on stage and like it was one of the best sessions I've ever done. Like it rated as the number one session of that conference. Right. And so I nailed it, but I was terrified. And afterwards, I was fundamentally changed as a presenter. Like I just had a different level of confidence after that. So it was a huge strive moment for me, but it like had this massive payoff.
There's a really interesting part in the book where you're talking about your experience in Kuwait, which is for people that don't know, a nation with very, very substantial wealth, very generous government. I think employees work between like 1 and 5 hours per week on average. So you'd think they must be all just living their best life, you know, super happy with everything is. But despite that, you found that many of the citizens were experiencing feelings of emptiness and highlighting that that the excessive comfort was actually leading to a lack of purpose and fulfillment. Tell us a bit more about that, and why do you think that real growth and fulfillment does come from this optimal struggle, as you were saying there, rather than just ease and having a comfortable life?
Yeah. Actually, I love the way you just summarized that. You've probably summarized it 10 times better than I ever have. Yeah. Like, a member of the royal family of Kuwait saw me present at a conference, sent me emails asking me to come to Kuwait to work on a project. Like my team kept deleting them because they thought they were a scam. But ultimately, I went to Kuwait to work on a project looking at how do we make the country happier. Now, obviously, when you're looking at making a country happier, there's many parts to it, and it's very complex. But one of the things we found, as you beautifully said, they have a royal family and a government. They're incredibly generous. It's a very wealthy country. The standard of living for the average person is incredibly high, and people don't want for anything. But because they're so well looked after, like literally they don't have enough struggle. They're not striving. Their environment is so good. There's a lack of struggle. And what we found is, as you point out, people lacked purpose. People lacked resilience. People lacked drive, and even entrepreneurism in that country was very low because people would go, well, why would I start a business? Like, why would I create that difficulty for myself? And it kind of pulled back their aspiration. So what we did with this project, well, there was multiple levels of it, but one of the things we did is celebrated. The Kuwaiti people are an incredibly resilient, they have a long history of resilience. And we celebrated that and talked about that toughness and that ability to handle adversity. And what we really promoted was that younger people being entrepreneurial and doing things. And like, actually, one thing I have to say, we're in a world where we're so judgmental of different races and religions, like beautiful, beautiful people. I truly miss them. They were just wonderful. But this was one of the things they faced. And it's so counterintuitive, but kind of having everything you want can be a really dangerous place.
You've got a chapter in the book called Could Everyone Please Shut Up About Happiness? Do you think as a society we've become too obsessed with this idea of happiness?
Yeah, we are massively. Like, one thing we have to understand about happiness is we've taken it from an emotion and made it this permanent state. So, happiness is an emotion that comes and goes. Anger is an emotion that comes and goes. So, we've got all these emotions that we're going to feel in the day, and we're going to feel thousands. But we picked one and said, that's our goal. And the happiness movement came out of that. And look, a lot of good came out of it, as did a lot of good come out of positive psychology. But we just went so far that what's happening is, unless we're happy, there's something wrong. And I would say in the last couple of years, my level of happiness would have probably dropped a little bit, like not in a bad way, but my level of fulfillment has grown massively. Like, I feel much more fulfilled in my life. So we have to be very careful. Like, it's delusional to pick one emotion and think we're supposed to feel that. But that's the reality of people's mindsets. Parents today, they expect their kids to feel good all the time. And if something comes along that's going to make them anxious or overwhelmed, they try and take that thing away. But Barbara Held wrote this brilliant paper called The Dark Side of Positive Psychology, I think it was. Now, there's this line that says, in society, we've boiled emotion down into one message, and that is positive emotion is good and good for you. Negative emotion is bad and bad for you. And because of that, we have become completely dysfunctional in that we're avoiding anything that brings negative emotion. We're trying to rescue people all the time. You think about striving, that's a really uncomfortable state. Like, that is not happiness. That is, oh my gosh, I'm out of my depth. Or that is like anxiety, fear. And I spoke to a school principal the other day, and he said, a parent rang me and said, my child has anxiety around public speaking. I'm writing this note to say, don't make him do public speaking. And the principal's like, the whole world has anxiety around public speaking. Like, who doesn't? I do it for a living. I still am anxious every time I step on stage. And he's like, that's the whole point. Everyone's anxious. We practice it. We get better at it. But this is what it's become. So yeah, that's why I wrote that chapter. And sorry, rant over. Yeah.
You said something interesting there as well around happiness being fleeting. And I think what you were alluding to is fulfillment is this longer lasting state that we can achieve. And it feels maybe deeper. I feel like happiness can be quite superficial almost.
Yeah.
Whereas I know when I've done things where I felt very fulfilled, that feeling it's like when you have a really good meal and you just feel like really satisfied and full. Whereas happiness, I think, is almost like junk food, where it sort of sustains you for a little bit, but then you're hungry again and needing something more.
Yeah, and it can be very hedonistic. I can go home and open a bottle of wine, and there's a couple of glasses of happiness right there. It's going to make me feel better. It'll numb me out from the day. But fulfillment, you're right. Like, I love the way you're describing these things. It's longer term. It's a bigger concept. So I'll just give you another example. And I try to use examples that I'm experiencing so I don't, disclose about other people. But we just completed one of the world's biggest studies looking at the impact of secondhand trauma on educators. So what we're seeing is more and more children are presenting trauma at school, and there's less services to support those children. And it was just one of the hardest things I've ever done. Hearing these stories of trauma, like my staff were in tears many times, like it was full on. And you talk about there was not a lot of happiness in this research because we're talking to people about trauma. We're experiencing the trauma, but we've just finished the study and it is one of the things I'm most proud of in my whole life. It is needed. It is something that people weren't studying. Like there's very little research out there on it. But I've got to tell you, at many points we went, we're going to see this thing through. Like it's costing us a fortune. It's so hard. But every time we had that thought, we just went, but nah, it's the right thing to do. Like it's important. So it has given us a lot of fulfillment, didn't bring a lot of happiness. Would I do it again? Absolutely. So that's how I would define the differences there.
Something I just thought of as you were talking there is and this won't always be the case, but I would feel like a lot of the times happiness for me would be I'm happy and that's serving something for me, whereas fulfillment is probably then overflowing into other people and it's probably affecting other people in a positive way. I can't think of many things where I felt truly fulfilled that hasn't then had a positive impact on other people as well.
Oh man, you are crushing this. Like it's such a great observation. And it's something I haven't I wouldn't have made that link, but it's a brilliant one.
Hi everyone, I want to take a moment to shout out Apex Everest, an incredible organisation and partner of the show who are pushing the limits of human resilience. Imagine this, climbing the equivalent of Mount Everest, but right here in the UK, by summiting the Helvellyn mountain 9 times in just 48 hours. But Apex isn't just about the challenge. It's the chance to be part of a year-round, vibrant community dedicated to unlocking your true potential. Whether you're looking to push your own limits or you're part of a team wanting to build an unshakable bond, this experience will stick with you for life. So if you're ready to conquer your Everest and be part of something special, check out apexeverest.com to find out more. This completion myth. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that. This belief that if you've got a goal and you achieve it, then you'll be happy or you'll be fulfilled, whatever it is, that sort of end state. So last year I did an Ironman. So I had a year's worth of training to complete that Ironman. And I was always thinking about finishing the Ironman and how great it would be to finish the Ironman. And don't get me wrong, finishing it was amazing. But actually what I noticed was the journey, that year that led me there, was so much more satisfying for me because of the sacrifices I had to make, finding the time to train around the family and around work, doing the training, which was obviously very difficult. The actual completion of the Ironman was just the cherry on top of the cake. So how do you see this completion myth as well?
Yeah, and once again, this is something we came across in our research because part of Strive, we looked at goal achievement. So if you think about your goal to achieve an Ironman, you can break it down into 3 really basic parts. You set the goal, you do the work, which we call the strive, and then you achieve the goal. Now, we said to people, okay, if you think about these 3 parts, what's the most fulfilling part? And everyone was like, do you really have to ask that? Of course, it's achievement. Like the only reason I do the other 2 bits is to get the outcome. But one thing about humans is we suck at predicting how we're going to feel into the future. And we're terrible at remembering how we felt in the past. We are just hideous at both things. So what we did is got people to do that process real time. So they set a goal, worked towards it, achieved it. So if you were in the experiment, we would have mapped that year. And what we would have done is multiple times sent you messages asking you specific questions. What emotion do you feel right now? What have you been doing? What was the hardest? So ask all these questions. So we do that. And what comes out is that the strive is the most fulfilling part. And weirdly, the parts that had the highest level of challenge and struggle were the moments people remembered and said that was a pivotal moment. Now, the reason we actually love those moments is they require us to be courageous and to evolve. And what we discovered in our research is human beings crave courage and evolution like they crave love and connection. It's important to us. So what we found is that we massively overestimate how good we're going to feel once we achieve something. And that's the completion myth, is we go, when I have this, I am going to be on top of the world. It's going to feel amazing. Now, when we achieve something, there is a period of elation. I'm sure once you finished your Ironman, well, after you finish it, you're probably comatose. And then when you reflected, you would have gone, oh my God, I can't believe I did it. It's amazing. But that doesn't last very long. And you very quickly fall into a period of flatness where you go, oh, like I kind of miss the strive and the goal, and what do I do with myself now? And we found this was universal. Like, we interviewed gold medalists that came back from the Olympics, and the most common thing they said is, I thought it would be a bigger deal. Like, I thought it would affect my life more, or I thought I'd just be happier about it, but it's kind of like I feel lost. Even like, we interviewed people that had sold their businesses for like hundreds of millions of dollars, and they just went, oh man, like I don't know what to do now. And it just didn't live up to what I thought it would be. That's the completion myth. So we've got to be very careful putting all our eggs in one basket. And rather, like you just described, as we're working towards it, taking the moment, like celebrate those achievements, celebrate that courage, look at how we've grown and evolved to get there, not just, the finish line.
Yeah, that's definitely something I learned from that experience.
I can't believe you did an Ironman. That's like superhuman. You're in the smallest percentile of the planet.
But what's interesting is when I first got it on my radar, maybe a couple of years ago, there was just no way that I thought I could do it. I think I saw someone with a tattoo and I was like, I wonder what that is, and did some research and looked into it. And I looked at the distances, particularly the bike, and just thought, there's just no way. I just can't do that. And then I started to build up, I think, particularly the bike, and then start to get the confidence I could do it. And then fast forward 2 years, and after doing it, it's funny how your mindset shifts then, and you think, yeah, that is doable. I mean, a lot of people do it. I know it's still a small percentile.
Yeah.
And then you see another challenge that's even bigger, and you think, oh, well, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I think there's something that you were saying there around overestimating. I think we can almost overestimate maybe the size, the challenges and things that we're looking to achieve as well. And then when we do them, we almost have a reset and think, well, maybe I could do something even bigger than that.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're all mental, isn't it? We just keep going, but that's the point of life, that constant evolution.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at it on paper, retirement's the worst thing you can do for your well-being. Like, when you retire, your well-being takes a devastating hit. But the people that really do well in retirement are people that find meaning and purpose and fulfillment in other things. They're still challenging themselves. They're still growing and evolving. So, yeah, I mean, this is such a universal thing. But one of the biggest problems, and this is what we talked about in the book, is we have a society that's every message is the opposite of, you should be happy, don't be anxious, don't get overwhelmed, avoid struggle. These are the messages we're being given. So it's concerning that our society is moving in that direction.
How do you think we can shift men's mindset around strive to be, as you were saying before, focusing on things that they might be uncomfortable with, rather than just thinking it's about doing things that they're comfortable with and they're just going to work harder and harder and harder at it?
Yeah, and just push, push, push. I love the fact that you asked that question, because I think men get this wrong a lot. And when men internalize challenge and struggle, they go, oh, that just means I have to work harder or push harder. So I was working with a group of very senior partners in a professional services firm, like, your KPMGs, EYs. I was talking to them about struggle and challenge, and they instantly went, "Oh, we're awesome at struggle. Like we crush struggle." One of the guys goes, "Oh, we eat struggle for breakfast." Like it was this very alpha cliched moment, and I'm like, "Nah, you don't." And they go, "Yeah, we take on hard projects with clients and we work our butts off and we pull long hours." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's just working hard at something you already do. Like that's not a big struggle for you guys. You've been doing that for years." And what I said to them, here's the things you really struggle with, like having a well-being conversation with one of your team. That like showing care is something you struggle with. Also, you struggle with putting time aside to spend time with your family. Like you're just used to working all the time. That's actually a struggle for you. Or even, you know, this was a big thing. You talk about men and women. One of the feedback is that those partners were really good at dealing with the males in their team, but weren't very good at dealing with the women in their team, where they, had to show more empathy or more care or communicate in a different way. So I think what happens with men is we go into struggle is just, well, what's the rock say? Be the hardest worker in the room or something. So that's where men tend to default. And I think what men could really benefit from in terms of their lives is full circle, coming back to what we talked about right out of the gate. Men find it very hard to be self-aware, to identify their emotions, to manage their emotions. So a real struggle for men is that ability to be vulnerable, to open themselves up, to connect with people. Like this is one of the hardest things that's happened in my life is I've lost two mates to suicide. And it's so devastating. And both of them had things happen in their life that were tough, and they just never talked about it, and they just pushed it down deeper and deeper inside, and they never stepped into that struggle of, I need help, I'm not okay. And I mean, gosh, if we got men to do that, we would change the mental health of men worldwide overnight. If we could just get them to go, yeah, this is really uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to have this conversation. Or it's really uncomfortable to look inside right now at how I'm feeling. And they just tend to numb themselves and just, that masculine thing of, I'll just keep pushing. So I think, to come full circle with what we said earlier, men really struggle with that more internal, emotional, even like a huge struggle is, if a man has a female partner, like, how do I be a better partner? How do I communicate better? How do I understand you deeper? Like, for many men, that's a huge struggle, but stepping into that is going to have huge benefits for their life. Does that answer the question, or have I just confused you?
No, perfectly. And actually, it's clarified something really nicely for me, that I think maybe going into this conversation, despite doing reading around this work, I was still of the mindset that Strive was about working harder, particularly at something that you're comfortable at, and striving
Yeah,
for that. But the,
yeah,
the, the comparison you made there, I think, was a really good one. You could have an opportunity to work really, really hard at something that you're comfortable with and put in more hours and more hours, but actually strive would be, as you were saying there, the example of talking and sharing about something that you're really uncomfortable with.
yeah,
That is actually your strive state.
yeah. Nailed it. And I'm just thinking another example is we did some research looking at burnout, but just burnout in women.
Hmm.
And oh my gosh, like I had no idea how many societal layers of crap we put on women about their role in society and what they have to do. But what we found is that women actually felt more comfortable burning out, like driving themselves into the ground, than they did practicing self-care. So the biggest strive and struggle for them is to say no. No, I'm not going to do that because I need to do something for myself. That was harder than falling apart from overwork. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's what this book focuses on, is what is the uncomfortable stuff I'm going to do that's going to allow me to grow so my life is better, rather than just pushing harder.
Mm. I want to come back to the example that you shared earlier around the child that was uncomfortable about public speaking, and the parent wanting the school basically to not make
Yeah.
them do it. And I'm thinking about myself as a parent of a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, so two pretty young kids. But I'm wondering what I can do as a parent, and for people listening, to instill this growth and this strive mindset for children, and like how early on should I be thinking about doing that?
Oh, look, I mean, I'm not a child expert around resilience, but here's what I've done in my parenting. So one thing I've been very aware of, and man, I'm just going to preface this by, I struggle with parenting. I think it's the hardest job like ever, and I screw it up multiple times. And my wife could just talk for hours on how I screw it up. But one of the things I've tried to do is not let my daughters avoid uncomfortable states and not rescue them when they don't need rescuing. And I'll give you a couple of examples. My eldest daughter's a gymnast, right? So she's done gymnastics since she was quite young, and she's 15 now. And a couple of years ago, they got a new coach, and I picked her up for gymnastics. She gets in the car, slams the door, and throws a drink bottle like on the floor. And I went, "Oh, was it that good?" She goes, "Oh my God, we've got a new coach, and I hate this woman, and she's so awful." And every time there's one kid in the group that kept misbehaving. And she goes, "Every time they misbehave, we have to do 30 push-ups." And I was like, "Yeah, kid, sometimes you get a tough coach." And I just, and this is the other thing. Like when your child goes through something that's difficult, you got to name and validate their experience. And when I say name and validate, is like in that moment I said, "Oh man, I can see that you're really angry, and I can totally understand why you're angry. I get it." And then I talked about, I've had some coaches who were really mean and some of the things they made us do. And she said, "I want you and mum to email the place and tell them that this coach has to stop doing it." And I'm like, "Negative, kid. Like, that's not going to happen." I said, "In life ain't fair, and sometimes you get coaches, and they're they make you do stuff you don't want to do." She did not like that response in any way. Went home, spoke to my wife, but my wife and I talked about it, and we went, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? She's going to get good at push-ups, right? Like, it's not traumatic. And a couple of other parents, like, there's a WhatsApp chat, got on, and we kind of went, I think, yeah, we shouldn't interfere with this. Like, this is not something we need to do. Anyway, what happened? 3 weeks later, the group of kids pulled the one that was misbehaving aside and went, "Cut it out. Like, we're sick of doing push-ups. Pull your head in." The group sorted it, and they learned really valuable lessons there, as did that kid of, if I'm doing things that are going to make it bad for others, they're not going to be my friend. So they had this really awesome growth moment. And that's what it's about. And we don't have to rescue them from everything. And even my younger daughter, who struggles at school a bit, she was really struggling. I think it was long division. She's like, "How the hell does that work?" And halfway through, she just looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm just not smart enough. I don't get it." Now, normally you're told, well, you would say to that kid, "You are smart. Don't say stuff like that. Oh man, that's a terrible attitude." Well, you're never going to get it with that attitude. And I just said to her, I said, "Welcome to learning." And I said, "Yeah, when I can't get stuff, I say similar things to myself, like, 'You're an idiot.'" And I said, "Lex, I made a mistake at work the other day. And, the first thing I said to myself is, 'You are so stupid. You're an idiot.'" And I said, we often do that in learning. And like, that's a normal part of the process. So if I'd have said to her, "Change your attitude, don't say that to yourself, you are smart," She doesn't understand long division. And I've also told her that her internal state is wrong and she's got to fix that. Right. So she's now going, oh, great. I'm having the wrong response and I'm not. So she's beating herself up over two things. I'm like, yeah, when I learn, and I said to her, the other thing is when I don't get stuff, I not only say I'm bad at that thing, I say I'm bad at everything. And she actually burst out laughing and went, oh my gosh, I actually said in my head, like, I'm just terrible at school. Like, I don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, we all say that. And we had this kind of laugh about it. And I said, all right, but explain to me what you don't get. And she's like, I don't get this step. And I went, oh, okay, let me explain that. So because I named and validated, she wasn't in her head going, oh, I've got to change my attitude. I shouldn't say that to myself. Oh my God, I can't. That allowed her brain to focus on the actual problem. And so one of the things I've learned that helps your children strive is naming and validating what's going on for them and not removing that struggle. That
Yeah,
makes
because
sense?
the instinct, it does, yeah, because the instinct is to jump in and rescue them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I feel that all the time.
And
I was
this, and
thinking,
I will say one thing here. This doesn't mean you just look at your kid and go, suck it up, princess. Like, it's not that. It's because you might need to intervene. And I'll give you a very quick example. My youngest joined a new school. So she went into a school that she didn't know anyone. She sat next to this girl, instantly made friends. But that girl had a best friend in the class, and that best friend didn't like Lexi becoming her friend, right? So the best friend comes in, does a couple of things, and pushes Lexi out of that group. She comes home, she's all upset about it. And we just said, oh man, that's so hard. Like, name and validate. That is so hard. Of course you're upset. You're probably angry. And she actually looked at me and said, nah, I'm just sad. Like, I make this friend and now she won't talk to me and I don't know why. And we're just naming and validating. And we talked about our experiences of how, yeah, like that happened to me when I was at school. And really what we said is sometimes friends don't work out. And like, as much as you want to be in that group, they don't want you in it, and work on other friends. Now, what happened a little later on is those two girls were trying to sabotage her friendships with other girls, right? So at that point, we went, okay, that's when the parents get involved. And we just rang the school. They were unbelievable. We told them what was going on. And the person said, actually, they've got a history of doing this stuff. We're on it. And they sorted it that day. And it was sorted. They were so brilliant. But you know what? Like, she needed us to champion her in that. And we said, like, they don't have to be a friend. Like, we don't want them to be her friend. Don't sit them down and make them be friends. But just don't let them get in the way of her making friends with other kids. That's all we want. Oh my God, it's kind of like therapy here. I'm telling I'm trying to use examples from my life just, so people can relate to them. But yeah, I should be lying.
yeah, no, I'll start providing couches for these sessions now. Um, yeah, I was thinking as you were talking there about the coach example, I was thinking coach could translate into boss later on in life, and obviously there's going to be situations where you're going to have to deal with a boss rather than a coach. But you're right, it is finding that balance, particularly with your children. You do
Yeah.
have this natural instinct to want to go in and rescue them, but I think you articulated it brilliantly there that there's probably a period where, as you said, you can name and validate and sort of help them embrace a bit of strive, but then there will become a point where you do need to like naturally step in. And I think it's just a case of, as a parent, you start to learn obviously where those states come
Yeah,
from.
where those boundaries
Exactly.
exist.
What are some ways that men can intentionally create strive state moments in their lives and just be more aware of it and start to almost create habits within their life to build towards this?
Look, I think there's various ways to approach this. You could do it in a real formal way where, like you did, you write a goal, I'm going to work towards it. I'm going to achieve it, and you can map it out. It can be informal, where it's just like me at the moment. I'm trying to be a better dad. I'm trying to engage with my kids, be more empathetic. It's not a formal process. It's just something I'm conscious of and something I want to do. But I think, particularly within our lives, just try and look at your life in different areas. So, in terms of fitness, that's really important to me. What am I trying to achieve there? And how am I striving in that area? Like of late, I've been reading a lot about males and just how terrible we are at keeping friendships. And we often get very lonely. Another thing I'm focusing on is being more social, reaching out. So I'm striving in that area. Then I have kind of my formal goals in work, but then I have these other, so it's kind of my health, my marriage, my parenting, my friendships, and my work are the areas that I'm focusing on. So it's I would just pick a few of those. And what we don't want to do is overwhelm ourselves with too much striving, too much struggle. And obviously, with striving, we want to also balance that with recovery and downtime. Like, you don't want to be on all the time. That leads to burnout. So it's also having that ability to pull back and look after yourself, and also have periods where, like, I'm not trying to achieve anything. I'm just like, cruising. I had a holiday recently and we just did nothing. And it was so brilliant. There was no striving at all. It was just be present, enjoy the moment. So, you want to balance it out.
Dr. Adam, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a really fascinating conversation. And I think my biggest takeaway from this has been really to clarify in my mind what strive is and what it isn't. And I think what it isn't is, as you were saying, becoming type A personalities where we're trying to achieve these massive goals, and they're very much around career and all of that kind of stuff, particularly things that we feel comfortable with. It can be these really small moments and small things that we feel uncomfortable with, but are ultimately going to move us to a place where we feel more fulfilled, that long sustained fulfillment feeling, rather than maybe these fleeting periods of happiness. And I think particularly on the talking about children and this naming and validating aspect, I absolutely love that. And I'm going to start doing that with my own children, because obviously there is this, particularly with young children, this desire to be always going in and rescuing them. And I think there is points where that is needed, but there's also points where you can almost encourage them to achieve their own strive state. So it's been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. And just the last thing I'll say, to particularly men listening to this, that naming and validating, I've shared this with mates, and I've got some really cynical mates, and they are like, that thing is gold. Like, that really made a change to my parenting. So, I would encourage people to implement that one and give it a go.
Brilliant. Dr. Adam, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot.